The warning klaxons screamed through the cargo hauler meridian as Marcus Vale fought desperately with the failing controls. Ice crystals battered the viewport like bullets, and the ship's hull groaned under the assault of Glacialis's perpetual storm. His knuckles were white against the control yoke as he tried to level out the plummeting vessel. "Come on, baby," he muttered through gritted teeth, his brown hair plastered with sweat despite the freezing cabin temperature. "Just give me another minute." The Meridian had been hauling rare earth minerals from the outer colonies when the hyperspace jump went wrong. Instead of emerging at the trading station near Centauri, he dropped out of FTL in an uncharted system, directly in the path of this ice-locked world's magnetic storms. Now his engines were dead, life support was failing, and the ground was rushing up to meet him at terminal velocity. Marcus managed to fire the emergency thrusters one last time, just enough to avoid a head-on collision with a crystalline spire that jutted from the planet's surface like a frozen dagger. The Meridian skipped across the ice field like a stone on water before finally grinding to a halt in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Silence fell, broken only by the whistle of wind through the shattered hull and the steady drip of coolant from ruptured lines. Marcus hung upside down in his restraints, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. His cargo hold had been breached, scattering precious minerals across the alien ice, but he was alive. "Well," he said to the empty cockpit, "that could have gone better." He triggered the emergency release on his harness and dropped to what had been the ceiling. His portable scanner showed the external temperature at -50°C, with winds gusting to over 100 km/h. Without proper cold weather gear, he had maybe an hour before hypothermia set in. Marcus gathered what survival supplies he could find and activated the ship's emergency beacon. The signal would take days to reach the nearest human outpost, assuming it could penetrate the electromagnetic interference that had caused his crash in the first place. He was on his own. The landscape outside was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Glacialis stretched endlessly in all directions, a world of blue-white ice broken by towering crystal formations that caught and refracted the pale light of its distant sun. The wind carved strange sculptures from the frozen surface, creating an alien architecture that seemed almost alive. Marcus had taken perhaps a dozen steps from his wrecked ship when he realized he wasn't alone. She emerged from behind one of the crystal spires like something from a fever dream. 8 feet tall and magnificent, she moved with liquid grace despite her imposing size. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, a pale silver blue that seemed to glow with its own inner radiance. Flowing hair the color of fresh snow cascaded past her shoulders, and her eyes were the deep violet of twilight skies. She wore what could generously be called armor, intricately crafted plates of some translucent material that followed the curves of her impressive form while leaving little to the imagination. In her hands, she carried a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy, its crystalline core pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Well, well," she said, her voice carrying easily over the howling wind. The universal translator in Marcus's survival kit struggled for a moment before rendering her words in accented English. "What have we here?" "A lost little human, so far from home." Marcus kept his hands visible and non-threatening, though he couldn't help but smile. Even facing potential death on an alien world, he found himself appreciating beauty when he saw it. "Just a pilot with really bad luck, actually. Marcus Vale, at your service." He managed a slight bow despite the wind threatening to knock him over. "And you are?" Those violet eyes narrowed with what might have been amusement. "I am Queen Zaretha of the Zephyrian realm, sovereign of this world and protector of its crystal domains." She gestured at the magnificent spires surrounding them. "You have trespassed in sacred territory, human." "Your Majesty," Marcus said, genuine respect in his voice despite their circumstances. "I apologize for the intrusion. My ship malfunctioned, I didn't exactly choose to drop in uninvited." Zaretha circled him slowly, her weapon never wavering. Marcus couldn't help but notice how she moved like a predator, all controlled power and lethal grace. "Humans," she mused, her tone mixing contempt with curiosity. "I have heard tales of your species. Small, short-lived, primitive. The idea that any Zephyrian would find you worth more than casual study is laughable. Ouch, Marcus said with a wry grin. And here I was hoping to make a good first impression. You jest in the face of danger, Zaratha observed, though something in her expression suggested she found this more intriguing than irritating. Is this typical human behavior? Only when the alternative is panic, Marcus replied honestly. Besides, if you were going to kill me, you probably would have done it already. The fact that we're having a conversation suggests either mercy or curiosity. Perhaps both, she admitted, then seemed surprised that she had. Her weapon's energy output shifted, becoming less immediately threatening. You will come with me, human Marcus Vale. The storm grows stronger, and even primitives deserve shelter before execution. Well, when you put it so charmingly, Marcus said, but he fell into step beside her as she turned toward a crystalline formation that seemed larger and more complex than the others. As they walked, Marcus found himself stealing glances at his captor. Zaratha moved with unconscious majesty, her head held high despite the buffeting wind. The crystal spires around them seemed to respond to her presence, glowing more brightly as she passed. It was magic and science combined, technology so advanced it seemed like sorcery. These formations, he said, raising his voice over the wind, they're not natural, are they? Zaratha glanced at him with surprise. You can tell. The geometric patterns, the way they pulse with energy, it's beautiful work. Architecture and art combined. Marcus ran his hand along one of the structures as they passed, feeling the subtle vibration within. Your people grow them, don't they? Like crystal gardens. For the first time, the alien queen's expression softened slightly. Few outsiders have ever recognized the artistry in our crystal cultivation. Most see only pretty rocks or sources of mineral wealth. Then most outsiders are idiots, Marcus said simply. This is incredible. The resonance frequencies alone must be precisely calibrated to withstand these storms while maintaining structural integrity. Zaratha stopped walking and stared at him. You understand resonance engineering? I'm a pilot and ship's engineer, Marcus explained. Spent most of my life working with exotic materials and energy systems. This is next-level stuff, centuries beyond human technology. Something shifted in Zaratha's violet eyes. The contempt was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, interest, perhaps even respect. Come, she said, her tone less imperious than before. My palace awaits. What Marcus had taken for just another crystal formation revealed itself as a masterwork of Zephyrian architecture. The palace rose from the ice like a frozen flower, its translucent walls catching and amplifying the pale sunlight until the entire structure seemed to burn with cold fire. Passages branched and merged in organic patterns, following design principles that were both alien and somehow familiar. This is your home, he asked as they passed through an entrance that sealed itself behind them with crystalline growths. One of many, Zaratha replied, though Marcus caught a note of pride in her voice. I rule 17 worlds in this sector, but Glacialis is my favorite. The harsh beauty appeals to me. The interior was surprisingly warm, heated by the same energy that powered the crystal formations. Zaratha led him through corridors lined with what could only be art, sculptures that moved and sang, paintings that shifted color with the viewer's mood, gardens of impossible plants that existed only as patterns of light and sound. You're staring, she observed as they entered what was clearly a throne room, dominated by a seat carved from a single massive crystal. Can you blame me? Marcus replied honestly. This is incredible. Your civilization, your technology, your... He gestured at her, then caught himself. Well, everything. Zaratha settled onto her throne with fluid grace, somehow managing to look both regal and relaxed. The crystal responded to her presence, glowing more brightly and humming in harmonious frequencies. Flattery will not save you from judgment, human. It's not flattery if it's true, Marcus said, meeting her violet gaze without flinching. Though I have to ask, if humans are so primitive and worthless, why haven't you killed me yet? I'm obviously no threat to someone who can grow palaces from living crystal. The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, the mask of royal authority slipped, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. She began, then stopped, her expression hardening again. You will be confined here until I decide your fate. Guards. Two Zephyrians materialized from alcoves Marcus hadn't even noticed, tall, elegant beings with the same silver-blue skin as their queen but lacking her overwhelming presence. They approached with weapons drawn but didn't seem particularly hostile. Actually, Zaratha said, raising a hand to stop them, I will handle this personally. Leave us. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed without question. Marcus found himself alone with the alien queen in her crystal throne room, wind howling outside the translucent walls while patterns of light danced around them. So, he said, settling cross-legged on the floor since no chairs were provided, what now? Royal interrogation? Exotic torture? Or are we just going to sit here and glare at each other until the storm passes? Zaratha leaned forward, her violet eyes studying him with new intensity. Tell me about your species, Marcus Vale. What makes humans believe they can venture into the deep galaxy when civilizations like mine have ruled the stars for millennia? Curiosity, mostly, Marcus replied without hesitation. Same thing that made you decide to talk to me instead of vaporizing me on sight. We see something new and want to understand it. He gestured at the crystal formations around them. Just like how I can't help but wonder how you've achieved conscious control over crystalline matrix structures. Conscious control. Zaratha repeated, and Marcus caught something like surprise in her voice. These crystals, they're not just responsive to your presence, they're actually interfaced with your nervous system somehow. The resonance frequencies shift when your emotional state changes. It's symbiosis on a level I've never seen before. Zaratha was quiet for a long moment, the only sounds the harmonic humming of the crystals and the distant storm. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. No outsider has ever understood that connection. Even most of my own people see it as simple technology rather than true partnership. Then your people are as blind as mine sometimes, Marcus said gently. Beauty and complexity like this, it deserves recognition. The alien queen rose from her throne and approached him, her towering form casting dancing shadows in the crystal light. She stopped just out of arm's reach, close enough that Marcus could see the subtle patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin. You are not what I expected from the reports of humanity, she said quietly. What did you expect? Something less. Her violet eyes met his. Something that would make it easier to justify the contempt my people feel for yours. Marcus stood slowly, bringing himself closer to her eye level though she still towered over him. And now? Now, Zaratha said, her voice barely above a whisper as the storm raged beyond the crystal walls, I find myself wondering what other misconceptions I have held about the galaxy and its many children. The palace crystals pulsed brighter around them, responding to emotions neither fully understood, as human and Zephyrian stood in the heart of an alien storm and found something neither had expected to discover, the first fragile seeds of connection that would soon bloom into something far more profound than either could imagine. Starbound Hearts. Part 2, Melting Barriers. The storm that had been building when Marcus first encountered Queen Zaratha became a raging tempest by the second day of his captivity. What the Zephyrians called a void storm, turned the world outside the Crystal Palace into a maelstrom of ice, wind, and electromagnetic fury that made his ship's crash seem like a gentle landing in comparison. Marcus stood at one of the palace's translucent walls, watching chunks of ice the size of ground vehicles hurtle past in the howling darkness. The crystal structure barely vibrated despite the incredible forces battering it, a testament to Zephyrian engineering that left him genuinely impressed. Admiring our architecture again? Zaratha's melodious voice came from behind him. He turned to find the queen approaching with 2 steaming cups in her hands. She'd abandoned the formal armor from their first meeting in favor of flowing robes that managed to be both modest and breathtaking, the fabric seeming to shift color with her movements like captured aurora. Hard not to, Marcus admitted, accepting the offered cup. The liquid within was pale blue and gave off a warmth that penetrated straight to his bones. This palace is riding out forces that would flatten most human cities, and it's not even straining. The crystals distribute stress through harmonic resonance, Zaratha explained, settling onto a bench that grew from the floor at her approach. The harder the storm strikes, the more deeply they anchor themselves to the planet's core. Marcus took a sip of the drink, it tasted like winter sunshine, if such a thing were possible, and joined her on the bench. Over the past day, their relationship had shifted from captor and prisoner to something more complex. She still claimed he was her prisoner, but the guards had disappeared, and she'd given him free run of the palace. "Tell me about this void storm," he said. "Your people seemed genuinely concerned when the warnings came in." Zaratha's violet eyes reflected the storm's fury beyond the walls. They occur perhaps once every few years, when the electromagnetic currents in Glacialis's upper atmosphere align with solar radiation in precisely the wrong way. The last one killed 3 of my advisors who were caught in the open. Hence the worry about a fragile human surviving it, Marcus observed. "You are not as fragile as I assumed," she said quietly, then seemed surprised she'd admitted it. "Thanks, I think." Marcus studied her profile in the dancing crystal light. "Can I ask you something that's been bothering me?" "You may ask." "I may not answer." "Why haven't you contacted your people about me?" "It's been over a day, and I haven't seen you use any communication systems." Zaratha was silent for so long that Marcus wondered if she'd decided not to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, controlled. "Because the moment they know of your presence, decisions will be made that cannot be unmade." "What kind of decisions?" "The kind that end with humans being declared a potential threat to Zephyrian security," she said bluntly. "My people have little tolerance for the unknown, Marcus Vale. They would demand your immediate execution or, at best, imprisonment for study." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "And you're protecting me from that?" "I am, postponing it." But her tone suggested even she wasn't sure why. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm rage beyond the crystal walls. The palace's harmonic humming created an almost musical backdrop to the destruction outside, turning chaos into something resembling symphony. "What's your world like?" Zaratha asked suddenly. "Your homeworld, I mean." "Earth?" Marcus smiled, settling back against the warm crystal. "Messy. Beautiful in places, ugly in others. We've got oceans that stretch to the horizon, mountains that scrape the sky, and cities that pulse with more life and energy than probably makes sense." He paused, remembering. "The sunsets are spectacular, oranges and reds and purples all bleeding together across the sky." "It sounds chaotic," Zaratha observed, but her voice held curiosity rather than disdain. "It is. Beautifully, wonderfully chaotic." Marcus glanced at her. "What about here? What's Glacialis like when it's not trying to kill everything on the surface?" "Peaceful," she said immediately. "Perfect crystalline formation stretching to every horizon, each one precisely placed for optimal harmonic resonance. No disorder, no waste, no unnecessary complexity." "Sounds lonely." The words slipped out before Marcus could stop them, and he immediately regretted his honesty. But Zaratha didn't seem offended. Instead, she turned to study him with those incredible violet eyes. "Lonely?" she repeated. "I don't mean any disrespect," Marcus said quickly. "It's just, perfection can be isolating. When everything is exactly as it should be, where's the room for surprise? For discovery?" "Chaos is not discovery," Zaratha said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Marcus gestured toward the storm outside. "That void storm, it's chaos, but it's also creating new ice formations, carving fresh patterns in the landscape. When it passes, your world will be different than it was before." Zaratha followed his gaze to where the storm was indeed reshaping the crystal spires visible beyond the palace walls. "Change is not always improvement." "No, but improvement is always change." She was quiet again, but Marcus could practically see the thoughts moving behind her eyes. The crystal formations around them pulsed in shifting patterns, responding to whatever emotions she was processing. "Your species fascinates me," she said finally. "You embrace uncertainty in ways that should be terrifying, yet you thrive in it." "And your species terrifies me," Marcus replied honestly. "The level of control you have over your environment, the harmony you've achieved, it's incredible, but it must come at a cost." "What cost?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "When was the last time something genuinely surprised you? When did you last discover something that changed how you see the universe?" Zaretha stared at him for a long moment. "Are you suggesting that perfection is a form of stagnation?" "I'm suggesting that maybe perfection and growth are mutually exclusive." Marcus met her gaze. "The most beautiful crystals are the ones with flaws, inclusions and irregularities that catch the light in unexpected ways." As if responding to his words, the palace crystals shifted their harmonics, creating a new melody that neither had heard before. Zaretha's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "That's never happened before," she whispered. "What?" "The crystals, they're improvising. Creating new harmonic structures without programming or guidance." She stood abruptly, moving to press her palm against the nearest wall. The crystal pulsed brighter under her touch, and new melodies joined the first in complex counterpoint. Marcus approached cautiously. "Is that bad?" "I don't know," Zaretha admitted, and the uncertainty in her voice was unlike anything he'd heard from the composed queen. "Change like this isn't supposed to be possible. The crystals follow established patterns, proven harmonics." "Maybe they're learning," Marcus suggested gently. "Maybe being exposed to something different, to chaos, to me, has shown them new possibilities." Zaretha turned to face him, and he was startled to see something vulnerable in her expression. "If the crystals can change, can learn, can grow." She trailed off. "Then maybe other things can too." Marcus finished softly. The storm chose that moment to intensify further, if such a thing were possible. The palace shuddered, not from structural stress, but as if the crystals themselves were dancing. The harmonic frequencies shifted and swirled, creating music that was both alien and achingly beautiful. "This is madness," Zaretha breathed, but she was smiling as she said it. "Sometimes madness is just another word for evolution," Marcus replied, then found himself stepping closer to her. "Your Majesty." "Zaretha," she corrected quietly. "When the universe is reshaping itself around us, formality seems inadequate." Marcus reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and touched her hand where it rested against the crystal wall. Her skin was warm, almost fever-hot compared to human temperature, and he could feel the subtle electric tingle of her bioluminescent patterns. "The first time I saw you," he said honestly, "I thought you were the most magnificent thing I'd ever encountered. Terrifying and beautiful and completely beyond my understanding. And now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Now I think you might be the most magnificent thing I'll ever encounter. But also..." He smiled. "Also maybe not so beyond understanding after all." Zaretha's free hand came up to touch his face, her long fingers tracing the line of his jaw with surprising gentleness. "My people would say this is impossible. That the biological and cultural differences between our species make any meaningful connection unthinkable. What do you say?" She was quiet for a moment, the crystal palace singing its new songs around them while the storm raged impotently outside. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "I say my people have never met Marcus Vale." The kiss, when it came, was like touching starfire. Her lips were warm and soft, tasting of the winter sunshine drink and something uniquely her. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin brightened, casting dancing lights across the crystal walls, while the palace's harmonic frequencies shifted into something that sounded almost like celebration. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Zaretha's violet eyes were wide with wonder and something that might have been fear. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Does it have to?" Marcus asked, still close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Yes, she said simply. Because now I know what I've been missing. Outside, the void storm continued its assault on the world, but inside the Crystal Palace, two beings from different species, different worlds, different ways of understanding the universe, had found something neither had expected, the beginning of love that would challenge everything they thought they knew about what was possible. A soft chime echoed through the palace, the communication system activating. Zaratha's expression immediately shifted from wonder to concern as a voice spoke in liquid Zephyrian through the crystal walls. My queen, the voice said, translated by Marcus's device, this is Kess, your chief advisor. The storm shows signs of breaking within the next few hours. We will arrive to escort you home as soon as conditions permit. Zaratha's hand tightened on Marcus's. How long do we have? He asked quietly. Perhaps 6 hours, she replied, her voice heavy with implications. Maybe less. Then we'd better make them count, Marcus said, pulling her closer as the palace crystals sang their new songs and the storm began its slow retreat toward the horizon. Neither of them spoke of what would happen when her people arrived. For now, they had this moment, this impossible connection forged in crystal and starlight, and that would have to be enough. At least until they could figure out how to make it everything. Part 3, The Art of Deception. The Meridian Gallery was a floating palace of culture and sophistication, its transparent walls offering breathtaking views of the nebula beyond while housing the most exclusive art collection in the outer colonies. Tobias Crane adjusted his perfectly tailored midnight blue jacket as he moved through the crowd of wealthy collectors, his practiced smile never wavering despite the nervous energy coursing through his veins. Tonight's exhibition was the culmination of months of careful planning. The centerpiece, a stunning sculpture called Hearts of Andromeda, sat beneath a pool of soft light that made its crystalline structure seem to pulse with inner fire. To most observers, it was simply a beautiful work of art worth millions of credits. To Tobias, it was the key to clearing a debt that would otherwise cost him his life. Exquisite, isn't it? A voice like liquid music spoke beside him. Tobias turned and felt his breath catch. The woman who had appeared at his side was luminous in the most literal sense. Her skin held a subtle inner glow that seemed to shift and dance beneath the surface, and her hair cascaded down her shoulders like spun starlight. She wore an elegant gown that seemed to be woven from captured aurora, colors flowing across the fabric in mesmerizing patterns. It certainly is, he replied, though he wasn't sure if he was referring to the sculpture or the magnificent being standing beside him. His trained eye recognized her species immediately, Lumina, one of the rarest and most mysterious races in the galaxy. I am Celeste Starweaver, she said, extending a hand that felt warm and somehow electric when he took it. I don't believe we've been introduced. Tobias Crane, he replied, raising her hand to his lips in a gesture that was both charming and slightly old-fashioned. Art dealer and collector of beautiful things. Her smile was radiant, literally sending ripples of light across her features. How delightfully honest. Most people in our line of work prefer more creative descriptions of their activities. Something in her tone made Tobias's instincts sharpen. He'd survived 15 years in the art world's gray markets by reading people correctly, and this woman was definitely more than she appeared. And what line of work would that be? Acquisition specialist, she said with a delicate laugh that somehow managed to sound both innocent and dangerous. I help discerning clients locate items they desire. Ah, Tobias nodded, understanding perfectly. A fellow entrepreneur. I do hope we're not here for the same piece. Celeste's gaze drifted meaningfully to the Hearts of Andromeda sculpture. That would be unfortunate, wouldn't it? Though I imagine the evening would become far more interesting. Before Tobias could respond, the gallery's lights dimmed and a holographic presenter began the evening's formal presentation. He found himself acutely aware of Celeste's presence beside him, the way her inner light seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, the subtle fragrance that reminded him of ozone after a lightning storm. The Hearts of Andromeda, the presenter announced, represents the pinnacle of Zephyrian crystal singing. Created over a century ago by the master artisan Veltar, it's said to contain the actual harmonized emotions of star-crossed lovers from the Andromeda galaxy. Tobias felt Celeste's attention intensify. The sculpture wasn't just valuable, it was supposedly imbued with genuine psychic resonance, making it priceless to certain collectors. His employer had been very specific about acquiring this particular piece, and failure wasn't an option. Fascinating, Celeste murmured. I've heard the legends. They say it can actually project the emotions it contains, allowing others to experience the love that created it. Romantic nonsense, Tobias said dismissively, though his pulse quickened. Beautiful craftsmanship, certainly, but the psychic properties are just marketing mythology. Celeste turned to face him fully, her luminous eyes seeming to see straight through his carefully constructed facade. You don't believe in love, Mr. Crane? The question caught him off guard. I believe in profit, beauty, and the thrill of the hunt. Love is just another commodity, packaged and sold to the highest bidder. How cynical, she said, though her tone suggested amusement rather than judgment. Perhaps you've simply never experienced the genuine article. As the evening progressed, Tobias found himself drawn into increasingly elaborate conversational sparring with Celeste. She was brilliant, witty, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of art history that rivaled his own. More troubling, she seemed to anticipate his moves with uncanny accuracy. When he excused himself to survey the gallery's security systems, she happened to be admiring pieces in the same corridors. When he tested the environmental controls, she was there to offer insightful commentary on the lighting. By the time the formal presentation ended, Tobias was certain they were after the same prize. Care to join me for some air, he suggested as the crowd began to thin. The observation deck offers magnificent views of the nebula. I thought you'd never ask, Celeste replied, slipping her arm through his with practiced grace. The observation deck was a marvel of engineering, a transparent dome that provided an unobstructed view of the swirling colors beyond. Tobias and Celeste stood at the railing, watching cosmic dust dance in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. It's beautiful, Celeste said softly, her inner light dimming to match the peaceful atmosphere. Sometimes I forget there's wonder left in the universe. You sound like someone who's seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners, Tobias observed, studying her profile against the stellar backdrop. Haven't we all? She replied, then turned to face him. Tell me, Mr. Crane, what drives a man to steal art from museums and private collectors? The directness of the question should have alarmed him, but somehow it felt like a natural progression of their conversation. The same thing that drives a woman to do the same thing, I imagine. Survival, adventure, the satisfaction of outwitting security systems designed by people who think they're smarter than we are. Celeste laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. At least you're honest about it. Though I suspect there's more to your story than simple thievery. There always is, Tobias admitted. Bad debts, worse choices, and a talent for finding trouble in the most unlikely places. And what will you do with the hearts of Andromeda once you've acquired it? Deliver it to a client who pays well and asks few questions. What about you? Celeste was quiet for a long moment, her inner light flickering with what might have been uncertainty. I intend to return it to its rightful place. Rightful place? The Zephyrian people. It was stolen from them during the expansion wars, sold to private collectors who cared nothing for its cultural significance. I've spent 3 years tracking it down. Tobias felt something unexpected twist in his chest. You're not a thief at all. You're trying to right a wrong. Does that change anything? She asked, her luminous eyes searching his face. Will you step aside and let me take it? The honest answer was no. His employer would kill him if he failed, and his own survival depended on completing the job. But something about Celeste's quiet dignity, her noble purpose, made him want to be a better man than he was. I can't, he said finally. I wish I could, but there are complications. There always are, she said sadly. Well then, may the best thief win. The heist began at precisely midnight, when the gallery's security systems switched to their overnight protocols. Tobias had spent weeks studying the building's blueprints, identifying weaknesses in the sensor networks and guard rotations. He moved through the darkened corridors like a ghost, his tools silent as he bypassed electronic locks and disabled alarms. He was halfway to the sculpture when he realized he wasn't alone. Celeste materialized from the shadows, her inner light completely suppressed, moving with inhuman grace through the security grid. "Fancy meeting you here," she whispered as they found themselves crouched behind the same display case. "Great minds think alike," he replied, trying to ignore how her proximity made his pulse race. "Though I have to say, your approach is more elegant than mine." "Years of practice," she said with a smile that was barely visible in the darkness. "Shall we make this interesting? What did you have in mind?" "A wager. Whoever reaches the sculpture first gets to keep it. No hard feelings, no interference from the loser." Tobias considered the proposal. It was foolish, dangerous, and completely contrary to his usual methodical approach. "You're on." They moved through the gallery like dancers in a deadly ballet, each trying to outmaneuver the other while avoiding the security systems. Celeste's natural abilities gave her advantages in stealth and mobility, but Tobias's experience and preparation kept him competitive. The final approach to the hearts of Andromeda required crossing a pressure-sensitive floor while avoiding motion detectors that swept the area in complex patterns. Tobias thought he had the timing perfect, but Celeste's ability to bend light around herself made her nearly invisible. They reached the sculpture simultaneously, hands touching the base at the same instant. The moment their fingers made contact with the crystalline surface, the hearts of Andromeda began to glow with inner fire. "Oh," Celeste gasped, her eyes widening as psychic energy flowed through the crystal. "It's real. The love, the connection, I can feel it." Tobias felt it too, a wave of emotion so pure and intense it took his breath away. The sculpture was projecting the feelings of its creators, two beings who had loved each other across impossible distances with a passion that transcended death itself. But more than that, the crystal was amplifying the emotions of everyone who touched it. Tobias found himself experiencing Celeste's feelings, her loneliness, her determination, her hidden vulnerability. And somehow, he knew she was experiencing his as well. "Tobias," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can feel, you're not doing this for money." "My sister," he said, the words torn from him by the crystal's influence. "She's being held by the syndicate. They'll kill her if I don't deliver this. And I can feel your fear, your desperation. You're not a bad man, just a desperate one." Their eyes met across the glowing sculpture, and suddenly the theft seemed like the least important thing in the universe. The crystal had shown them truth, about themselves, about each other, about the connection that had been growing between them all evening. "We could share it," Celeste said suddenly. "The sculpture. I know people who could create a perfect replica, indistinguishable from the original. You could deliver that to your client, and I could return the real one to the Zephyrians. And if your friends can't create a convincing fake, then we run," she said simply. "Together. Far from here, where neither the syndicate nor anyone else can find us." Tobias stared at her, this luminous being who had appeared in his life like a shooting star, offering him something he'd never dared hope for, a chance at redemption, at love, at a life worth living. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Celeste's inner light pulsed with warm golden hues as she smiled. "Because the crystal showed me your heart, Tobias Crane. And it's beautiful." The security alarms began to wail as they lifted the sculpture together, but neither of them cared. Hand in hand, they ran through the gallery toward the emergency exit, their combined laughter echoing through the corridors like music. Behind them, the hearts of Andromeda continued to glow, its crystal matrix recording new emotions, hope, trust, and the first stirrings of a love that would prove every bit as powerful as the one that had created it. 6 months later, Tobias Crane opened his legitimate art gallery on the paradise world of Elysium, specializing in the ethical repatriation of cultural artifacts. His partner, Celeste Starweaver, handled client relations with a grace and warmth that made even the most difficult negotiations seem effortless. The hearts of Andromeda sat in a place of honor in the Zephyrian Cultural Center, its crystalline surface pulsing with the accumulated emotions of thousands of visitors who came to experience its wonder. And in a secure vault beneath Tobias's gallery, a perfect replica served as a reminder of the night two thieves found something worth more than any treasure. "Do you ever regret it?" Celeste asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. "Regret what?" Tobias replied, pulling her closer as her inner light dimmed to match the peaceful twilight. "Giving up the criminal life. The excitement, the danger, the thrill of the hunt." Tobias considered the question seriously, then smiled as he felt the familiar warmth of her presence, the way her light seemed to respond to his emotions. "I found a better thrill," he said simply. "One that doesn't require running from the law." "And what's that?" "Loving you," he said, turning to face her fully. "Every day, watching you light up when you help return a stolen artifact to its people, seeing you glow with happiness when we make a difference in someone's life. That's more exciting than any heist ever was." Celeste's luminous form pulsed with waves of joy that painted the evening air in rainbow hues. "I love you too, Tobias Crane. Even if you are the most reformed criminal in the galaxy." Reformed criminal and proud of it, he laughed, sealing the declaration with a kiss that made her inner light explode in fireworks of pure happiness. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love that had transformed two lost souls into something magnificent, proof that sometimes the most beautiful art is the life you create together.